Today we learn about one-point perspective. There was once a point in time when artists painted with no sense of space or depth. Figures and objects appeared flat. Objects and people away from us appeared the same size as something meant to be depicted very close to us. These paintings did not use linear perspective. This painting, The Garden of Eden, is one of those examples. Luckily, an Italian architect, Filippo Brunelleschi, came along in the 1300s and developed linear perspective in art as we now know it today. This painting, by another Italian artist, Masaccio, who was one of the first great painters of the early Renaissance period, was the first artist who demonstrated full command of the new rules of perspective. The figures in his paintings have volume, and the buildings and landscapes realistically recede into the distance. This picture shows how all the lines that move away from us converge at one point in the distance, known as the vanishing point. By the late 15th century, artists were in total command of perspective and were able to create their art in a beautiful and realistic world. The great painters of the time were using the system first created by Brunelleschi to wonderful effect. This painting by Raphael, called The School of Athens, is one of the best known examples of linear perspective during the Renaissance. It was painted in the years 1510 to 1511. Notice how all the lines on the parts of the buildings that go away from us into the distance meet at one point. That point is known as the vanishing point. Let's use this photograph to demonstrate the idea of linear perspective. The word line comes from the word linear. So if we take a line and connect the tops of the doorways, as they move away from us, they appear to get smaller. Now, if we were in this space, of course, they would actually not get smaller. They would all be the same size as we walk down this hallway. But when we're looking at it from one place and looking back into the distance, they appear to get smaller as they move away from us. This is what creates a sense of depth, like we could actually walk right into this picture, even though it is a flat two-dimensional picture. Same thing happens if we connect a line from the bottom of the wall. It meets back at that same point in the distance. If we put a point on this beam, the top of the ceiling, and connect it, staying along that beam the whole way back, it meets back at that same point as well. The beams on the other side of the ceiling are also going to meet back at that same point. Even these beams over on the other side of the photograph, on the very outside edge, if we follow a line from one point, it will connect back to that same point in the distance. That point is what's known as our vanishing point. The vanishing point sits on our horizon line. The horizon line is where the earth meets the sky. Now, on an interior, inside of a space like this one here, we can't actually see the horizon line, but we know that it's there. Notice how, even though all of these lines meet back at that same vanishing point, and spaces get smaller as it moves away from us, even though these lines all meet back at that same point and have a diagonal slant to them, when we move on to, or when we look at the lines, say for the side of the door, that line stays perfectly vertical. So the same goes for this side of the door, also stays vertical. So the tops and the bottoms, that's what's changing size, getting smaller as it moves away from us. But the sides of the door stay perfectly vertical. This is one of the trickiest parts of creating a perspective drawing, is that people will create trees, and because they're so in tune with making the trees get smaller as they move away from us, staying inside these diagonal lines, they start having sort of a slanted tilt to them, where realistically the trees should be vertical, straight up and down. The only thing that's changing is the size of them as they move away. So the trunks stay vertical, straight up and down. Ooh, that one's not quite so vertical. The sides of them stay vertical straight up and down. The only thing that's changing is how tall the tree is as it moves away from us. So it should be getting smaller and smaller as it moves back into the distance.